Hello, and welcome to this on-demand session from Artlogic Connect, which took place in September 2025. We're so glad you're here. This year's conference welcomed over 4,200 people from across the globe, making Connect one of the largest online gatherings in the art world, a space where our community shared ideas, explored new perspectives, and imagined what's next for the market, a positive, opportunity-filled future. Artlogic is proud to host Connect as part of our mission to support the arts community and help every corner of the art ecosystem thrive. We're delighted to share this session with you so you can revisit the insights, the conversations shaping today's art world, all at your own pace. Thank you for joining us, and let's get started.
Thank you so much, John. And hello, everyone. I am absolutely delighted to be moderating today's panel, Has Art Pricing Gotten Out of Hand? Before we dive in, I do want to take a moment to talk a little bit about the word value, because it gets thrown around a lot when we talk about art. There's market value, which is the prices that works achieve at auction or in galleries. Then there's cultural value, which is the social, intellectual, and aesthetic importance of an artwork. And then there are our values, so the principles that we bring to the market, principles like fairness, sustainability, or integrity. Now, these three things overlap, but they're not the same, and I think the confusion between them can spark some of the most fraught debates in the art world. I first noticed this tension coming to the fore, I think, at Art Basel in Switzerland in 2022. After years of speculation in the contemporary sector, prices, particularly prices for living artists, had gotten very high. And suddenly people were asking, wait a second, is this work really worth that price? And at first, I think the market softening seemed like a problem mainly for art flippers who were left kind of holding the bag, so to speak. But soon enough, confidence was shaken at even more established price points. Fast forward a couple of years to today, the downturn deepened, and this spring's auctions in New York, which are long kind of looked at as a bellwether for the market, only added to the concern. When people lose their faith in financial value as a proxy for cultural worth, the ripple effects are felt far beyond the market. And pricing scrutiny can trigger a recalibration of how we understand art itself. Lately, there has been a lot of talk about mood in the art market, which is really another way of talking about confidence. And that's why today's conversation feels important to have. The market is in a moment of reflection. And yes, we are beginning to see some encouraging signs of recovery. ArtNet's mid-year intelligence report tracked growth in the $100,000 to $1 million price segment at auction in the first half of 2025. And last night's $100 million Pauline Carpitas sale in London has significantly lifted spirits as we head into the fall season. But whether you read the numbers as positive or negative, we all know that the art world runs on more than just data. Confidence is fragile, and it will take work to restore it fully. So it's never been more important to approach the question of pricing, not only in terms of dollars and cents, but also through the lens of our principles, the choices that we make about the kind of ecosystem that we want to build for artists, collectors, and gallerists alike. I'm fortunate to introduce an all-star panel of speakers here tonight to unpack this topic. First up is Wendy Norris, the San Francisco-based gallerist whose poetic programming champions artists such as Maria Magdalena Campos Pons, while also representing the estates of Leonora Carrington and Dorothea Tanning. Beyond her taste in art, I have appreciated that Wendy has been unusually candid about the structural problems facing the gallery system and is experimenting with new solutions that borrow from other industries and challenge the status quo. And we have Jeffrey Majid, and I hope you'll forgive me for this description, a gambler turned art collector with a range that spans from today's emerging contemporary voices to old masters. Earlier this year, Jeff co-founded the Metropolitan Museum of Art's new Vanguard Council for Next Generation Patrons. He's become both a player and a voice in the art market, sharing his ideas on art, collecting, and culture with a growing audience online. And last up, we have Alan Schwartzman, who is a man who needs little introduction, but I will give one anyway. He has spent more than 3 decades advising some of the world's most influential collectors, helping shape major holdings in modern, post-war, and contemporary art. He's known both as a tastemaker in contemporary art and as an authority on the market, and his projects span from guiding private collections to conceiving museums. He was a founding curator at the New Museum in New York and the creative force behind the Instituto Inhotim in Brazil. So thank you all so much for joining me today. I want to dive right into it. And for our first question, I want to direct it to all of you. And I want to turn to the title of this discussion. Has art pricing gotten out of hand? Well, has it? Wendy, do you want to come in first?
Sure. Thank you again, Naomi, for having me. I'm very much looking forward to this. For me, it's the process and any methodology that is driving the prices in art that seems to have become irrational in certain segments of the market. So the rationality or lack thereof is something that I would definitely agree to.
What about you, Jeff? Has art pricing gotten out of hand?
I'd say that the prices made up or determined by, am I frozen?
No, you're good.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I'd say the prices being determined by galleries and dealers in large part have gotten out of hand, but the love and interest and value, I'm glad to use the word value, but the value of art is as strong as ever.
Alec?
I see already at the beginning of this season, and we're really just a week or two into it, a sense of gravity and practicality on the part of many dealers in terms of pricing. We've acquired some works already at the beginning of this season in the primary market, which have been priced more conservatively than they probably would have been even 6 months ago, and similarly in the secondary market.
So I want to dig into that a little bit further. Actually, maybe we can stay with you, Alan, because I was going to ask kind of where in the market right now you notice a disconnect between price and value. But it sounds like you're saying that maybe there is less of a disconnect than there was previously.
I think that there are disconnects, and where there are disconnects, there's going to be real difficulty in the marketplace. We've certainly seen over the last 6 months several very notable galleries close, who were not anticipated to have to be likely to close, and I think that that we're going to see a lot more closures for galleries that don't get practical in terms of pricing. Sometimes this has to do with how things are priced for the work of younger artists, for mature artists in the primary market. And in the secondary market, things that have been offered to us privately through galleries have really been very fairly priced, much more practically so than they would have been in the past.
Wendy, I want to bring you in here as from the perspective of a gallerist. I mean, how do you feel when you hear that? And then I want to ask you a little bit about the prices of living artists, because we've spoken about that a little bit before and kind of not reflecting their experience. And can you explain kind of why this is a problem?
Right. I would agree with Alan that the sort of secondary market has been a lot more rational. That is, it's easier to price in some senses, the secondary market, because there's public information that is available oftentimes from the auctions or from ArtNet. So for me, it's easier to do a quantitative analysis and then apply all of the qualitative variables that we look at when we look at an artist, where we can measure their body of work. With respect to living artists, I have found a wide range of practical and highly impractical prices. I'm also a collector myself. I look at a lot of artists and compare them across the range of where my colleagues price their art, their respective artists. And I find oftentimes it's not commensurate with their resume, like the legitimacy, how many museum exhibitions they've been in, how many museums have actually acquired their work and not been given their work. So I look at the range geographically and maybe intergenerationally of collectors to see how sustainable the collector base is for a given artist. And so when I'm thinking of a contemporary artist, I'm really trying to approach it with the greatest ability of thinking about the sustainability, longevity, and the overall health for the artists themselves. So how they're not all of a sudden underwater 3 to 5 years from now, but they're gradually growing in line and in lockstep with all of the wonderful things, hopefully, that are happening to them. And so I would encourage an artist who's listening, or a fellow gallerist who's listening, to try to take a longer term approach. Even a 5 to 10 year horizon in some cases is longer term versus a transactional nature to it. And that's sometimes what I see happening. People are pricing, to where they think they can get the most out of it, not thinking down the road. And that is where I think some of your title comes from today.
Mm-hmm. I want to come back to the question of data and analytics in a minute, but Jeff, just first, I want to hear from you. What do you mean whenever you say that prices are too high?
Yeah, I think thank you for that question and for having the panel. And I think it's even important to talk generally about what prices people mean, and even when people say the art market is slow, what art market or which art market? Because I've noticed that sort of in almost all the conversations, when people say the art market or the art world, it seems like now they invariably mean the world of primary galleries showing contemporary art. They're not talking about an old masters auction. They really mean, so that's why I think it's great to have someone like Wendy Norris on this panel. We don't know each other, but I have tremendous respect for what she's done. And it's interesting, like, no one is saying the Leonora Carrington market is down, because it's not. It's tremendously strong. She's a great artist, and it seems like that's been handled really well. So what people mean is this sort of endless churn of brand new shows in ever expanding galleries. And so that means that I think it's partly, I've been sort of on record saying some of the media coverage of the current state of the art market seems a bit off, but now I realize it's actually just two things being talked about as one. I'd say that the love and interest in art around the world is stronger than ever. And even the desire, the love, it's easy to disprove that there's lack of interest for art. Just look at, like, I'm glad you mentioned Pauline Carpitas' sale. The demand and sales and prices for great and even good art is stronger than ever. But nonetheless, there's a massive problem in a lot of the gallery world. And that does mean lots of galleries are in trouble. That means that if you're saying, is the health of the gallery system great? It's not. But does that mean love and desire and interest in buying art is down or bad or generationally changing? It's always generationally changing, but I don't think those are the same. And one way that these things meet is prices. So sometimes when I think people talk about prices, they're saying, like, the prices are too high. Like, look at that high price achieved for a great Agnes Martin from the Emily Fisher Landau sale, right? Prices are too high. That is not what I mean. Very important to say that. And articles often conflating the two things. When I say prices are too high, I'm talking about prices that go out because someone said, how should we price it? Let's go with this. And then they say, things aren't selling. When asked, I'm going to say that sales are slow. And where are the collectors? Where are the new collectors in this new generation? When it's easy just to tell that, like, look, people who love art don't want to think about prices. It's a misnomer to think that only speculators or investors want to think about prices. People think about prices when the prices are really high, and the prices of a lot of art are more substantial to the buyers than I think people think. So, if obviously, I don't know. I mean, I love art. I don't want to think about prices. I want to think about art. But so I think it comes up when I talk about prices. Basically, the simplest way to talk about it is times where the prices are high enough that it has three effects. It's stifling sales, it's discouraging new buyers, and as Wendy very correctly pointed out, it's actually destroying the career of a lot of artists. And how it's destroying it is that the prices are getting too high, sales don't happen, then the gallery says, hey, your sales are slow, and then artists' careers languish or actually don't have gallery representation anymore. And it's not because they're not a good artist or even a selling artist, it's because their prices are stuck at a point that they can't sell. So prices too high means prices that are too high and not selling. That's, I guess, important thing to clarify.
Great answer. And I'm really glad that you brought up the specter of art media, and I'm going to dig into that later on in this conversation. So I want to continue to kind of set the scene a little bit first and talk about data. So when you are deciding whether to buy, sell, or advise on an artwork, what tools or analytics do each of you use to set or compare prices? Alan, can we start with you?
Sure. Well, first off, I start with my eye. I mean, whether or not whether something is worth collecting is a question of whether we believe in an artist, whether we believe that a particular example is a great example and worthy of collecting, and then price is a question of doing research. It's ArtNet is certainly the first tool that virtually everybody goes to nowadays, but having relationships and being able to call upon dealers, both private and those with galleries who are active in those artist markets, and to have the confidence that you're getting accurate information is critical in order to understand a price and whether that's an appropriate price. There are times where we have recommended that where we see a work as being so critical to the development of a collection that we're working on, that we have encouraged clients to pay above what is perceived to be market. We indicate where that's the situation. We also do the research to ascertain whether such an example is likely to arise in the market in the foreseeable future. And those are when it's unlikely that another great example will come forward, at least within the time frame of a particular moment's market, that's when we've recommended that people feel comfortable spending more. But mostly collectors we work with want to have confidence that they're buying the right works at the right prices. And if they're getting values, that they understand that and that they have a sense of where we see the profile of that artist market going. And when they're paying above market, that they see that that's actually investing in future value in a way that they couldn't otherwise acquire such a work.
It's great. And I think you captured the nuances of where the hard data can take us and where, that's limited. I want to hear from you, Jeff, from a buying side. What tools do you use?
I mean, I couldn't say it better than a lot of what Alan just said. I mean, mostly I'm looking first with what I love, what speaks to me, what grabs me by the heart, what I fall in love with. And I'd say people have said this a lot, but it's true. The things that I look back and wish I had done it differently are often things where I didn't listen to myself. I listened entirely to someone else, or sort of I don't know, outside factors other than what I loved first and spoke to me. So I'd say it's really the question of value and quality only come in second and third. I'd say quality is important in the sense that it's sometimes comparative, like Alan was mentioning, in a way that I believe as well. Sometimes you're looking to see how great of a artwork this is in relation to the other artworks that the artist has made, and some of that does take reference to other things and learning a bit. I think it's one of the best things you can do learning about art is just see a lot of art, so you have some frame of reference for each thing you see. So I mean, it's helped a lot to go to a lot of museums, I feel like still that's one of the best things. Maybe this is a time to make an interesting point about art fairs, which I know is not quite the question, which is that a good example of pricing being too high is that basically art fairs have turned into museums for me. I still go to art fairs because I love looking at and learning about art, but because the first factor is loving something, the second factor is thinking about the quality of the artwork in relation to other artworks for me, and the third is thinking, okay, am I getting anything resembling a fair price? With few exceptions, but some exceptions, the major art fairs almost always, and it's amazing how, I think there was a lot of conversations about, were there any Americans in Art Basel and Basel, were, this and that, where were the collectors? I was there and I looked at a lot of art. I'm not sure I'm one of the Americans that people mentioned, but I was there and I didn't even come close to buying anything. And it's because there were actually some amazing things, especially in the first floor section of historic art. There was things that I fell in love with. I think of, just to kind of put an example, there was one artwork that I thought was amazing. I saw it. I just thought, this is a spectacular artist and artwork. Then I looked at other examples and thought of other examples I've seen. I loved it. Then I asked the price, and it was like more than 2.5 times what any sensible price could be. And I get it. It could be because the costs are so high. It could be because it came from a consignor and their asking price was so high. It might not be the fault of the person who priced it, who was in the booth. And I was actually an owner of a gallery that I didn't know. And we happened to be sitting next to each other at dinner that night. And lovely guy, probably the best booth at the fair, I thought. And he said to me, "What do you think of the fair?" I said, "It was great." And I said, "I loved your booth." And we talked about that exact artwork. And he said, "And it didn't sell, And I said to him, I mean, just like, it's hard to, I didn't say anything because we didn't know each other, but like, it would have sold to me if it wasn't priced 2.5 times too high. And again, maybe that's because that's the consignment price he got it. But that's a good example of my process. I look, I fall in love, I compare, and then I'm just hoping I'm getting a fair price. But if I'm not, I don't buy it.
Thank you. And Wendy, I want to bring you in. So you mentioned a little bit in your first answer about the tools and the data that you use when you're setting price. I want to think about another factor, in a human factor in the trade, and talk about art advisors. As over the past decade, advisors have become more central to how art changes hands, and as sales have increased, so have the number of intermediaries, including the much discussed appearance of the so-called Gmail art advisor. So I want to talk a little bit about that. So how do advisors affect gallery collector relationships, or indeed art prices?
Well, they definitely do. For me, a great advisor like Alan and many others, one of the greatest things they do as service for their clients is that they help with transparency. I mean, my role as a gallerist, which is very different, is I am trying to provide as much data or as little as my collector or the advisor that I'm working with needs for their clients and for my clients to feel comfortable. So for me, there are times, and these are perhaps not the advisors that I would suggest working with. Maybe they are these Gmail advisors you just mentioned, which I hadn't heard before, where an advisor is selecting things for their client based on how much they're going to get from me or my directors, and or if they could add up or inflate an invoice. And that is just not how I work. I am open book, and I feel like there's a huge swath of advisors who don't need to have any license of any kind, and I think that they are creating a lack of confidence in the market. When I set a price for a Leonora Carrington or a Chitra Ganesh, that is the price in the market, that with all of my geeky data that I love and all of my intuitive skills that I hold dear, is the price. And so when I have advisors messing with my markets, I just tend not to work with them. Or when I have them eating into my margins, that's also someone I'm not going to give access to first, second, or even third. I've learned in my 22 years of doing this that I love to work with the people that I love to work with and will bend over backwards for them. But when we have new collectors who are trying to help, and need help from an advisor for all the wonderful things they do, I just try to connect them with great advisors. I do see a lot of my colleagues, and I'm very close with many, many dealers around the world, giving a significant percentage over to advisors, and it's not a business model that works for me. I would be one of those people folding if that's what I did. And so I caution those advisors out there to maybe rethink their business models and just provide a service, and work with the galleries like mine and many others who really just want to be like this treasured center for information for them, across the economic and cultural value set. And that's ultimately, much like Jeff said earlier, I really, price is not something I really want to talk about much. That's why I've had a pretty strict discount policy for 22 years, and I stuck to it. Like, when Jeff walks into the gallery and a collector walks in behind him, I'm going to give them the same discount. It's not like a favorite, most favored nation status here. I do try to be very equitable across the board so that I can build confidence. So I spend a lot more time talking about the work, why it matters, why the hell anybody should care. And so pricing can be an obstacle, but if it is, it's probably not the right home for it. But I also honestly believe I just want people to feel comfortable. I'm in tech central. I mean, Sam Altman's right here, Johnny Ive is right there. Like, I have to be, these guys, they need data, right? So I try to make them happy and comfortable. And from that point forward, it's about, does it move me? And am I, do I have goosebumps? Any of that, right? So, but I don't know that the rest of the world shares all of that view. But I think hopefully this correction in the market will help us, like in conferences and panels like this, will help us to reassess how we get back to just greater transparency and comfort and rationality I think it will serve us all in growing the market.
Thanks, Wendy. Jeff, do you use an art advisor at all?
I'll keep my answer this one short because I'm probably not the key person to on the panel. We've got a great art advisor on the panel, and I'm not. I guess simple reason is that when I started, I was so I had so little ability to collect financially, and was so inconsequential that no one would have wanted to advise me. And then by then, I was so self-motivated that it seemed like I would just find my own things. But I'd say just on the topic of this, it's less specific. I know there's been a lot of conversations about bad art advisors and good, just like any group of people, teachers, plumbers, whatever. There are people that do better and worse. And but I'd say you brought up a great word in the opening, which is confidence. Because sometimes I think people talk about confidence as in is confidence in art up, is confidence in art down, as if, and I feel like it's one of the things I've taken, not just with the media, but in lots of conversations about art, as if art is somehow like an index fund or like the price of gold, where you can see like art is up, art is down. And none of those aspects are like that, not just because art is so varied and there's so many different types of art, like people aren't, I don't know, someone might say art is down, but again, they're not looking at, Leonore Feeney or Leonora Carrington market. But it's not just that, it's also like confidence in what? And I think that part of the problem is that I think confidence in loving art is as strong as ever, but a lot of people have lost confidence in the people that are selling them the art. It's not just like bad actor art advisors. There's a feeling that, and where it's how it relates to pricing being too high. People need to have confidence that the people that are selling them are selling them what they think is a good artwork at a fair price. So it's almost the thing I've been thinking about saying is like, what's it called in church where you go into a little confessional and you say your sins? If you've been showing, advising, recommending, promoting, dealing art that you don't think is actually good, please report directly to the confessional, because there's been a lot of that, and it's not just like rogue art advisors scamming their clients. Let's be honest, there are a lot of the galleries that are reporting slow sales expanded endlessly, so they have so many spaces to fill, and then they're like, oh shit, what is in our sixth space again? Oh yeah, and someone's like, oh, should I buy this? And they're like, yeah, sure. To be honest, it's not very good, but we had to fill the space, whatever. And so that's not an art advisor problem. That's an advisory problem across the board. That's a problem about where people are getting their art advice from. And the example I use a lot is back ages ago, if you ask people that were clients of Leo Castelli Gallery who their art advisor was, they would say Leo Castelli. And even I think, people that bought all of Gavin Brown's program, they were great galleries who they had a vision and people believed in them. And when it's not just scammy art advisors, but across the board, when it becomes a market of pumping out inventory that people don't believe in, if some of those sales are slow, that's not a crisis in the confidence in art. That's a crisis in the confidence of those points of sale.
Thank you. There's a lot in there. I wanted, to come back. So Alan, I'm sure you're itching to get into this conversation here. Does this talk about bad actor art advisors resonate with you? Do you recognize what is being spoken about here? And what does an honest advisor kind of bring to the table?
I have heard from many art dealers about advisors who really aren't advisors. They're more like gatekeepers who know one tiny bit more than their clients who know very little, if anything, about art. And so they may have a relationship or two. They may not even be strong relationships, but they become intercessors who often get in the way of their clients' learning rather than expand upon their knowledge. So for us, well, first of all, I've never taken any money from a gallery. We've always worked on a retainer basis, and I've always said that my advice should be as valuable to a client if I'm encouraging them to not buy something as if I'm encouraging them to buy something. And so, while all the collectors I work with trust me and have confidence in me, it certainly helps to maintain this this way of billing for what we do. That keeps us most committed to what's in the client's best interest rather than what's in our fee's best interest. Having said that, there are some collectors we've begun working with in recent years who prefer to be paying us on an as-they-go basis, and we're comfortable doing so. We do so at a very relatively small fee percentage. And what we usually ask for is that such a person, a client, pay a certain amount up front so that there's a commitment to us working together from the beginning. I don't think it's beneficial working on spec, but I have heard many dealers complain about art advisors who really don't know what they're doing or how to establish a developing clientele. For me, what's always been most important is having an educated client, is educating the client. I feel like the more that the collector knows, the better equipped they are to appreciate, to recognize when we're bringing good ideas to them and to help them in the development of their collection. We don't like to, I'm comfortable and happy to be introducing the collectors we work with to all the dealers that we have relationships with, because I feel like the more people they have access to, the more they learn and the more comfortable they get with the knowledge that they're developing. So I think it's important for an advisor to both function with integrity and transparency, but also to bring vision to the collection and how it can evolve. And and uh, it's very meaningful, I think, to be introducing collectors to other collectors so that they feel like they're part of a community.
I want to bring us to the topic that we kind of teased a little bit in the beginning, that Jeff teased, and this is about media and its role in kind of market confidence. There's been a lot of attention of late to the idea that art media coverage of a market downturn risks becoming a self-fulfilling prophecy. Now, as a journalist, I will say that I disagree that this is what's happening, but I would love to hear your views. What role does art media play in shaping market confidence and behavior? And Wendy, I want to come to you first. Do you feel that negative press is chasing away clients?
I do, because I think that's what we're all talking about in the industry. This article or that article, or what vibe is out there. And my issue with the press, the art press anyway, if you're reporting, like if you're writing for the FT or the Wall Street Journal and you're reporting on economic analysis, there are all these data points that you pull in, right? GDP, various indices that you can pull and report, and then back up your overall statements. I just don't see that many art writers with the economic chops that I'd like to see. The things that I studied when I was, going to grad school and whatnot. I just think there's these just big generalizations thrown out there with like no meat or substance behind it. Maybe an anecdote or two, but anybody can go out there and pull up a few anecdotes walking the halls in an art fair or whatever. So I feel, and I would love if the art writers that would just be a little bit more substantive. I saw some crazy like 3-digit growth rate on Leonore Carrington, one of my artists who like nobody knows more about Carrington's market than me, and period. And I would wish that was the growth rate. And I was wondering, where did this writer get this crazy number? And I wish it was that number. So I just, even in my own market, I can't trust the numbers that I'm seeing in the press and the art press. So I know it is hard because we're in an industry that is mostly opaque, but I would at least ask for more definition and meat behind some of these just statements. And I really wish everybody would title their articles a little better, because I think there's a huge disconnect between who writes the titles, because I know it's separate people, right? And who's writing the article, because the titles are so much about clickbait and they're so sensational. It makes me just not want to even bother reading it sometimes. So yeah, I wish we all, the message of this panel, it seems like we all need to be a little bit more accountable to our peers and to one another, and moving forward. And it's nice to be able to recalibrate in the market at this kind of pivotal moment.
Can I jump in for a moment, Naomi?
Yes, go ahead.
I was an art journalist. I was a journalist before I was an advisor. and I knew a lot about the market, so I often reported on the market. I'm always open to speaking to journalists who who are reporting on the market and are seeking to get knowledge that they don't otherwise have access to. So I'm happy to share knowledge as long as I'm not violating confidentialities. And and I find that there are a number of journalists who have often developed a kind of bad reputation for misreporting things, but that's not been my experience with some of these journalists. I often will. I think if somebody is getting things wrong, then if I have confidence that they're honorable people and good journalists, my goal is to inform them on what it is that they're missing in order to tell stories better. And so I've seen that impact. I think that that's important. I do think that most advisors and dealers avoid speaking with journalists, and that's unfortunate.
Yeah, thank you. Jeff, I know you have thoughts about this too, because we spoke about it last week, and then you actually wrote a column about it. So let's hear your thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, my column wasn't specific to this, but and I probably read another column about art pricing. I think that's about to come out, and so on, and also an article for the Art News Top 200 Collectors issue that'll be about a related topic about the gallery world and bringing in new collectors. To me, I've never, I appreciate all the art media people, all the journalists. Everyone's doing their best with the information that they have, and a lot of people are doing great stuff. So if I ever say something that's contradictory to something that someone's put out, it's not to censor them or to whatever. It just, everyone's sort of advancing as best they can their viewpoint, and I'll also advance mine. But I'd say the times that I disagree, I would never say someone shouldn't print something, but the times where I'll come out forwardly and disagree is if something is being advanced consistently that seems to be obscuring what the actual truth is, then as best I understand it, then I'll do my best to say that. And to me, I get actually why it maybe drives the most clicks to just say market down, market up, market, everyone's scared, market confidence is low, confidence is high. But actually some of those things are obscuring issues that I care deeply about. For me, it's all very related. The best way I know how to describe it is, in fact, there is a massive change needed in the contemporary gallery system, and that has nothing to do with the overall love or interest or desire for art. That's just my opinion. But I think that I can quite easily, just in logical sentences, disprove some of the things that are written over and over. And even in several articles I've just written for different publications, people come in and try to edit my words to add these things, which are in fact not true. One of the most obvious ones is that I say someone idea and they say, well, let's add also, of course, we have to acknowledge that interest in buying art is down because of global instability. Based on what? In fact, I don't believe that's true. There's many crises happening around the world, and the world is totally unstable. There are lots of absolutely brutal and vicious and unjust things happening in many countries, including our own. But if you notice, many other collecting categories are on fire. People are buying fashion. People are buying watches. People are buying, there's a worldwide frenzy for Labubus. How does it make any sense? So people are not buying art because of war in Ukraine, but millions and millions of people are buying Labubus? How does that make any sense? And yet over and over people print it. And the reason why I think it's important to point that out is because in a way they're obscuring something different. Like, for example, when they just run an article of, for example, I don't know, it was over and over run, Tim Blum saying, you have to understand that at Art Basel, I was there were no collectors there, no one's making serious engagement, and they just print that and say, well, why is there less interest in art? I was there, and I bought my first artwork ever from Tim Blum. That's the first gallery I ever bought from. He knows exactly who I am. I'm building a collection of many artists, including many artists that they show. He didn't speak to me, I didn't speak to him. Why is that? And we're friends. If these are just printed, like, I'm gonna tell you right now, it's not because of war in Ukraine. There are fundamental things, right? I was there. I flew to Art Basel to buy art, and I did not buy something from the very first gallery that I bought from. So if people are just going to over and over print falsehoods as if they're true and that obscure the actual truths of maybe what need to change, for me, one of the most important things that needs to change is how to make the world of art welcoming and involve more kinds of people. That it's only in art is people talk about there's a generational shift. And again, this is amazing. This gets printed over and over. People were like, where is the next generation? A lot of families that parents collect and their kids might not want to collect. Can we stop for a moment and just think about how insane this is? They're talking about the next generation of the same family. There is no other world where people are expecting that their only hope for clients is to be the children of existing clients. People who own a company are hoping they'll pass the company over to the next generation of their same family. But there's no other world where people talk about the audience for that item, that it must be the next generation of the same people. What about the new people? So I feel like it's really important that if over and over articles are printed as if interest in art is down, when in fact there's something that needs to change, which is how to involve all the people around the world, for example, in the tech industry, or what about in different countries of the world or different worlds who might want to collect but don't feel welcome. To me, that's important. And if we're just saying like there are fewer sales in Basel, I guess that means no one likes art anymore. They have a right to print that, but I'm going to also speak out saying my version as well.
I think it's interesting to hear all three of you speak on this, and it sounds like we're kind of teasing out a distinction similar to the one that we kind of covered when we were talking about art advisors and the difference between good advice and bad advice. It seems like we all agree that we need journalism, we need good journalism, and that we all need to be a little bit more accountable to each other. Now, I have thoughts on this, but I don't want to take up panel time. I can see that we've got 15 minutes left, and I wanted to make sure that we had enough time to kind of bring in the audience. If the audience wants to know what I think, they can ask. But let's turn it over to the Q&A portion now. I think John has been moderating the chat and is going to be able to feed us some of the questions. I'm excited to hear it.
Absolutely. Myself and my other colleague, Natasha, we've been diligently moderating and looking at all the wonderful comments. Thank you. And if you do have any questions, please pop them into the chat and we'll try and get through as many as possible. The first question is from Alexa. Sorry if I've set off anybody's speakers in their house by saying that. For artists being represented for the first time, who should be responsible for setting prices? Is it reasonable for artists to expect to make a living from their art practice once represented or within 5 years?
I feel like that's a good question for Wendy.
Yeah, happy to take that. I think that all artists should have a role in the setting of their prices. I heard in a meeting that I was in on Monday in New York, Nicholas Party said that he recently asked the folks at Hauser & Wirth, can you kind of tell me how you set my prices? And who are the 15 artists that you're comparing my prices to? Like, how do these other 15 artists compare to my prices? So I thought, why not think about how an artist approaches this? I would ask a gallerist, how do you derive this price? Is it based on the amount of works I make every year, my material costs, where I am or where you think I'm going? But I definitely think that an artist should be involved with the gallery, using the gallery's ideally vast experience in setting prices. So it should be a joint thing. I work with each and every one of my artists. We talk about pricing almost every year. We set aside time to just make sure we're all in sync with that. But I don't know about making a living in 5 years. I would like to think that's every artist should be able to be able to make a living on their art. But I know so many artists who have been doing this for years and still love teaching or love the other outlets that they explore as a means to their art practice. So that's a tougher question I can't quite answer.
I would add that once you step outside of the 3 or so mega galleries, the vast majority of galleries representing anywhere from 20 to, let's say, 40 artists pay the cost of that gallery through the sale of the work of 2 artists, anywhere between 1 and 3 artists. Most artists, they don't, their work doesn't sell well. They don't have the momentum in sales to see actively rising prices. And I think that the more artists who enter into creating art with the expectation that they can support themselves from their art are creating a kind of fragile basis for their art to develop, but also taking a very commercial approach to it, which as we've seen, has created a glut of perhaps very professional but fairly mediocre artists.
I agree with that. I agree with that wholeheartedly. Yeah.
Great. We'll move on to the next question, which is from Otto. Art prices keep climbing higher and higher. Sometimes I feel completely disconnected from the actual work or its cultural impact. Do you think this is sustainable, or is the art world getting out of hand and risking a bubble that pushes out serious collectors and the public?
I don't think prices are continuing to rise now. I think that they're settling into a place of sustainability.
The only thing I'd add, just to agree, and cultural impact, I'd just say one quick thing, which is that's something we haven't touched on, but I feel like only in art do often that it's worth pointing out that some of the price is rising. It isn't just from like bad actor galleries or galleries that have a lot of overhead that need to whatever. Some of the demand for rising primary prices has come from artists. And I think it's worth, I totally understand why that is. Art, being an artist, is an unstable career. It's hard to make a living. People want to make sure they make a living. They know other artists that are selling for more and so on. But there is a bizarre disconnect, because I feel like only in art, because the prices seem so imaginary, especially as an artist, you're like, oh no, my friend, now I guess his paintings are 200. Where did that come from? That's crazy. You guess it's just made up. That people almost feel, and it's funny, I've even heard of I have a friend who's a very old school gallerist, and she was telling me about an artist I wouldn't have expected. He's been showing for a million years, and he was saying, why is so-and-so's prices higher than mine? Even these are both legendary artists, and they were still comparing their prices. But in other fields, you don't really get this. There's no feeling that, like, you know, like a musician wouldn't be like, why am I not playing as big venues as Beyonce? It's like, it's pretty obvious, like, there's cultural impact of Beyonce. You're not going to, you know, until you're at that level. But for some reason, it seems so imaginary that people are forgetting that cultural value should play a role in value.
I mean, I'm a big NBA fan. I mean, it's the thing I know second best to the art world. And I mean, athletes are negotiating their contracts all the time, and the amount of in terms of their contract, it's a direct reflection of their sort of value and overall ranking. And so I do think there are other industries that use value, and sometimes artists, to measure one another and see how they kind of rank within that system. It's not wrong. It's just unfortunate, I think.
Great. We'll move on to the next question from Patricia. Should the art world embrace full transparency by publishing prices online? Does that undermine the way art is traditionally valued?
I'd be in favor of it. I should say be in favor of making prices available on inquiry. I think if you start publishing them, then you start to overemphasize the transactional nature of collecting art, which also destabilizes art collecting. But I don't believe in obscuring what prices are when asked. And most galleries, if one were to go in and had no relationship, but you ask prices, you'll be told what the prices are. I think there are very, very few galleries that withhold that information. They may not publish it, but they make it available.
But it has to do with accessibility too, right? I mean, if you don't know how much something costs and you don't necessarily have the confidence to inquire and know that you'll be told when you inquire, I think there is a case for having that transparency.
Agree with both things said. And just to add one thing, to me, the transparency conversation is just sort of like agree and, of course, like more transparency. But the only thing that I'd add is that sometimes people talk about the transparency of a use case of, like, it's me, literally me, and I'm at Art Basel and I'm asking about an art prize. But the thing is, I'm already there. I'm already involved in the world. I'm already very motivated. To me, the more interesting thing is transparency of just making more people aware, like even just basic things like how to access. Like, for me, the biggest barrier to entry to getting into art was just even knowing that this was all there. Once people are there inquiring about prices at a major gallery, at a major art fair, they're very far along. The thing that's missing to me is just knowing even that, like, gallery shows are open to the public, that you can buy if you're not a billionaire aristocrat, and, you know, and so on and so on. Is making the actual art world and experience more transparent, not just the literal pricing.
I mean, in my mind, because I work across two different sort of segments of the market, you know, with my living artists, absolutely. We publish it, it's out there all the time. However, and just candidly, with 20th century estates and artists that I work with, I don't publish it. You have to ask for it. And even then, because there are so many bad actors, I mean, I have to be, there's a reason why I am the market leader and these artists. And it's, you know, sometimes I'm competing against my little, you know, 8-person team is competing with Christie's and Sotheby's. And so I'm trying to keep it from their hands. And it's a friendly game of competition, but but I don't always readily share. And I also have more data, speaking of, for my secondary market artists than the auction houses, because I've sold more. And that's information that is, very, very valuable. And it's not something that I readily share unless we're talking about acquiring something, and or if I'm talking about consigning something. So it's a little, not, it's a case by case basis, depending on the market. But for primary market, absolutely.
Fantastic. I think, do we have time for a couple more? One, maybe two more questions?
Yes,
John?
we've got time for 2 more questions.
Great.
So the next question is from Vic, which is, how do I negotiate an artwork? If I don't have all the liquidity right away, can I negotiate installments or something else?
I feel like Jeff probably has an answer to that.
Oh, I wish I had a great one. I mean, I feel like every case is different. Maybe all I'll say is that, there was a moment where when everything was happening instantly and everything was red hot, it really did make it harder if you were someone who needed a bit of time to pay, or you weren't a super, super high net worth individual in relation to the thing. And I think actually a sort of slower pace will help people be able to pay for things that they might not be able to because things are less frenzied. And I think that's great.
I would also not encourage, if one is dealing with honorable galleries, I wouldn't seek to over negotiate in prices, because galleries should be pricing, more often than not, the galleries at least that I work with are pricing things fairly and appropriately. And if you negotiate in a very tough way, you often don't get access to the best work next time around. Galleries are all about, or collecting is all about, relationships. And so one has to develop good, trusting relationships. When you develop them, you're offered great material. Galleries are less likely to seek to get top dollar out of you and seek to sell at fair and appropriate prices.
I would add that, for me, maybe I sound a little old school in this, but I'm a matchmaker at the end of the day, and I'm really placing the work with collectors that I think are going to be the great stewards of the work at any level. And so if I found the right buyer and I feel like they have a genuine love of the work, then I do try to do whatever payment plans. I've worked with so many museums. That's really one of my main folks that I work with, and we have to just kind of fall in line with where the collectors and meet them where they are. So I don't get offended when someone asks for special treatment, but I will just be honest on what I can do. And I think that that discussion is also a really, really good discussion to have with, and it's honest, and it forges stronger relationships for when the next time you come in and we already know where we stand.
Great, and we're on to our final question. What are the exact tools the panelists are using to help them price artworks?
So I guess this question is kind of wanting people to name names of products. And
I think so, yes.
I come from the tech world originally, so I built a proprietary database in the cloud before any of the folks here were using or knew probably what the cloud was, using Salesforce, because it's a local company, and I capture all kinds of data for works that I haven't sold and works that I have sold across all my artists. I can adjust it for growth rates, inflation. It's a total geeky database, and I use it just for my own curiosity, but and then we stand in front of the works and look at it. So ArtNet is key. I couldn't, like Alan and Jeff have both mentioned, ArtNet is the go-to. Every single person in my gallery is on it, weekly. So.
Yeah, I've used ArtNet pricing. I've just started recently using ArtDI a bit to learn. But also I'd say, it's helpful to just, a lot of how I've learned is asking questions from people more knowledgeable than me.
Well, that seems a perfect place to end what has been a wonderful discussion. Thank you, Jeff, Alan, and Wendy, and Naomi for leading this panel, and a perfect way to end our 3 days of Connect. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in, and we look forward to seeing you next year. Once again, thank you to our panelists and to Naomi. It's been wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, everyone.